Hi, this is Ryan Saddam, co-founder and chief experience officer at Client Savvy. Welcome to another installment of the CXPS Knowledge Sharing Module series. This week, we bring to you Reid Tolley of Talent Matters. Reid's executed some really interesting research around what makes a good and effective CX leader. Reid, please take it away.
Thanks, Ryan, and hi, everyone. I'm looking forward to sharing what we learned from leaders of CX. We studied 15 leaders who are leading highly recognized client experience implementations in their firms. They've been recognized both by PSMJ and by Client Savvy. The project goal, the goal of our research was to create a client experience assessment tool to help select and develop client experience leaders. I've long been the client experience has long been a value of mine. As I've become aware of and familiar with the Client Savvy process, I see it as a great way of embedding client experience in the culture of a firm in order to create competitive advantage. It has struck me that selecting the right person for this leading a client experience effort is a critical success factor. You know, too often hiring looks like this. You know, we refresh or write a job description, we advertise, we collect resumes, we interview, we do the best we can to select the person who we think will be able to do the job, but then we hope and pray. The Harrison Assessment provides the predictive analytics needed to select the right person for the right job consistently. And we set out to create a better way to select client experience leaders. More specifically, the questions we wanted to answer, you know, what's behaviorally different about leaders of organizations that have been recognized for their client experience? And what have these leaders learned about implementing the client experience that others might benefit from learning? There were two components to the research that we did. Participants in the study were first posed 5 open-ended questions that you can see on this slide. And we did some interesting things with their responses. And the responses pointed us to trait tendencies or behaviors that are important and that were different about these leaders. We asked what have you learned about what is most important to client experience? What surprising things have you learned about client experience? What traits and capabilities are important for successfully leading an implementation inside a firm? What skills and competencies did you personally have to develop or strengthen to effectively champion client experience within your organization? And I have found that adding a free space is a good idea in doing open-ended questionnaires. There's always something that people want to say, and I just didn't ask the right question. We got some really rich ideas from that free space question. And then finally, we asked the last question we posed to these 15 leaders of client experiences: what were some of the hardest things for people to give up or change when undertaking a client experience implementation? We're in this 20 minutes or so, we're going to share with you some of the highlights of these of the responses we collected. On our mural, there will be the full unabridged summary of their responses will be posted. The second part of the research methodology that we did was those 15 CX leaders completed the Harrison Assessment. And for those of you who are not familiar with the Harrison Assessment is a behavioral assessment that measures an ecosystem of 175 behavioral tendencies and preferences. And what we were after was providing the talent analytics to pinpoint the unique tendencies of leaders of recognized client experience implementations. So we created the end result, and our goal was to create a behavioral competency analysis tool that could help people who are leading client experience efforts strengthen their leadership, as well as to provide assistance to organizations to hire the right person to lead their client experience initiative. we want to share with you some of the survey themes that we heard. These themes became clues to traits, behavioral tendencies that were unique to these group of 15 client experience leaders. And you can see some of the highlights there, that just phrases that I cut and pasted onto this slide. A true interest and desire to serve, understands the client's business objectives and perspectives, drives accountability for client-centric culture, and walks the talk and is an example for others. The survey responses, indirectly provide us clues to critical behaviors for those leading client experience implementations. In the Harrison assessment system, essential traits are key drivers of success for a specific job. Essential traits are what was unique or different about these 15 leaders that have led successful client experience implementations and have been recognized, their firms have been recognized. The survey also provided us clues to what are called desirable traits, and I'll come back to that term desirable traits in just a few minutes. Some of the highlights, some of the other comments that we got, from those open-ended questions that we posed to these 15 leaders. Acts as a true partner in success, understands that internally we must rely on one another to ensure we're delivering our client's best experience, creates positive client experiences with anyone, regardless of the relationship, follows through, is relentless in the pursuit of client relationships. That last comment is insightful too. Allows teammates to develop and find their purpose. And again, more survey comments that provide us with clues to important behaviors exhibited by these 15 client experience leaders. In the Harrison system, desirable traits, while not drivers of success like essential traits, a desirable trait, the absence of a desirable trait at a certain optimal trait strength can hinder one's success. You might think of desirable traits as kind of the backup singers in a band, or the music wouldn't be quite so rich if the backup singers weren't behind that that lead singer. And so desirable traits work quietly in one's background, supporting one's success. And so it's important for desirable traits not to be too weak or too low. It's really important for essential traits to be strong or high. The other category of traits that we identified when we did our research was traits to avoid. And traits to avoid are kind of interesting. You could think of them as the derailers, to steal a Center for Creative Leadership term. They're the behavioral habits or tendencies that we have that undo our good intentions. And often they're invisible to the person that's exhibiting or has certain traits to avoid. And you can see the clues we got. Don't be a pleaser. Don't be overly harsh or punitive. Listen and ask good questions. Keep an open mind. Be your authentic and transparent self. And that last comment is really powerful. Be clear, direct, and to the point, even when the client doesn't welcome the news. I thought that was particularly, a particularly powerful statement. And again, so the survey also, indirectly pointed us to unproductive behaviors or tendencies, behaviors that would inhibit anyone who's leading a client experience implementation or effort, that would inhibit their success and of the project itself. This is a very busy chart full of numbers, and just briefly, the Harrison, the 15 client experience leaders completed the Harrison assessment, and it measures 175 behavioral tendencies or preferences, and we're able to do things like calculate averages, ranges, correlation coefficients. So the survey, the open-ended survey questions provided us with qualitative data the Harrison assessment provided us with quantitative data. And so we merged the two together. And what you see on the next page is how we mapped Harrison traits, to both to the open-ended survey that we collected, as well as the Harrison assessment data. And for example, you see that survey item, the survey quote there: true interest and desire to serve is motivated beyond personal recognition, financial gain, and achievement by contributing to a greater good and success of our clients, strives to provide services and partnerships with those whose values align with yours. In Harrison lingo or terminology, that's called cause motivated. And the data suggested that it should have a trait strength of 8, or in that essential trait range. And the other thing I was going to mention was, what in my work with AEC firms, I find cause motivated to be a strong tendency or preference, and that's the desire, to make society better. And I assess so many people, professionals in the AEC industry, and their cause motivated is always high. It seems to be in the DNA of the industry. Another qualitative survey response we got was, understands the client business objectives and perspectives, leverages all revenue generating offerings, financially astute. In the Harrison term world, that's called an interest in finance and business. And the assessment data indicated this should be an essential trait for a client experience leader, and it should be set at a trait strength of 8, which is extremely high. And so just a little taste of how we took the open-ended survey and the Harrison assessment data to begin to build a behavioral profile of an ideal client experience leader. Elaborating just a little more, expanding on this, so we're building a success. We set out to build a success profile. What's different about client experience leaders whose efforts, whose firms have been recognized? And we're focused. So we're trying to identify essential traits, desirable traits, and traits to avoid. Our research pointed to 12 essential traits, and again, essential traits in the Harrison world are key drivers of success. And by the way, everything the Harrison assessment measures can be developed. It is not a personality assessment. And so any assessment, any Harrison assessment, if there's things that are, if there are gaps, these are things that can be developed by the person receiving a Harrison development report. The essential traits we identified for client experience champions are listed here in order from 1 to 12, but these are all key drivers of success. These are all what was different or distinct about the 15 client experience leaders that we studied in our research. And from my own experience, wants to lead is a critical preference for anyone taking on this role, as well as wants challenge and takes initiative. And these were all things that were common in the 15 individuals that we studied, as well as things like open reflective, open reflective to feedback of clients, but also open reflective to peers and associates that you're working with in implementing client experience in that firm. And also, I think experimenting is being willing to try different approaches to implementing client experience. I wasn't surprised that experimenting was identified as a critical behavior for CX champions. Over on the right side of the slide, just a little bit of a screenshot of an example of the client experience behavioral competency report. There's an overall score that's displayed, and then below that are all of the details of how a candidate scored on each of these essential traits. Desirable traits, we identified 14 desirable traits. And again, remember, these play a supporting role. If they're not sufficiently developed, they can hinder success, but they're not quite as important, as those essential traits. And on the slide here, we've identified the top 7. There were 14, but here's the top 14: collaborative, optimistic, persistent, systematic, warmth and empathy, valuing, working in teams. And kind of a paradoxical to systematic is flexible. At the same time, in the behavioral DNA of these 15 client experience leaders we studied, there was a flexibility and an adaptability that's an important behavioral tendency to successfully leading client experience. And finally, the third category of traits that we identified in building a behavioral profile of these 15 client experience leaders was traits to avoid. And remember or recall that traits to avoid are behaviors that often cause people difficulty, and they're often invisible to the person. Traits to avoid are often the result of over-reliance on certain behaviors. And they're often the result of, in Harrison terminology, a paradoxical trait imbalance. And to kind of elaborate on that point, how the Harrison assessment identifies traits to avoid, you see the paradox called communication. And this paradox is all about effective interpersonal communications. And it turns out that people who are really effective interpersonal communicators have two seemingly opposite or paradoxical trait tendencies. They're very comfortable and skilled in being frank, direct to the point, and at the same time, they have this incredible capacity to state things in a tactful manner. And people who are balanced have access to both of these behaviors. They can be very frank when they need to be. They can be very diplomatic when they need to be. They can be the perfect blend of these two behaviors situationally. And when somebody has an imbalance, they over-rely on the behavior they know and love, and that imbalance can cause them difficulty. And those imbalances are what Harrison identifies as traits to avoid. And just the top 6 traits to avoid that we identified in our research that would be derailing for somebody leading a client experience implementation in their firm: self-sacrificing, harsh, dogmatic, defensive, self-critical, and evasive, a very indirect communication style. And the other thing we did as part of this project was created a behavioral interview guide for firms engaged in selecting a internal client experience executive sponsor or champion. And for those of you who are not familiar with behavioral interviewing is a really powerful interviewing technique, and it's based on the premise that past performance is a strong predictor of future performance. So in an interview setting, you get the person to tell you examples of when they've done certain things. So for example, the number one essential trait, I've never seen it this high before, but when we studied client experience leaders, the number one essential trait was cause motivated. And so we provided a behavioral interview that gets the person talking about that trait. Tell me about what motivates you most when working with clients. That is, what keeps you going, performing at high levels. Is feeling appreciated, financial compensation, or something else entirely? And then we provide in the interview guide targeted behaviors. So we provide to the person doing the interview or the interview panel behaviors to look for in an interview setting. And so it really paints a clear picture of if that person is strongly cause motivated, what would it look like? And it's as part of this project, we've created this behavioral interview guide to help organizations select the right person for this job and to validate what the Harrison assessment seems to be saying about this candidate. I think also this tool could also be used indirectly as a way of pinpointing as well to develop incumbents. You know, the behavioral anchors paint a real good picture of what each trait looks like behaviorally. We've created packages to help firms select client experience candidates. And we've also created a development report package to help incumbent client experience leaders or their executive sponsors, you know, to help develop them. And the Harrison Development Reports uniquely pinpoint very specific behaviors, if developed or changed, would strengthen that person's impact in champion or leading client experience in this case. Just a little bit about Talent Matters, my firm. You know, our mission is to help organizations and their associates achieve their potential and long-range success. And we achieve our mission by the services that you see listed there. And oftentimes, in creating very custom solutions for our clients, you know, if there's a common denominator, it's the Harrison assessment. The Harrison assessment is, for us, is a very powerful and versatile tool in helping us create very custom talent selection and development and succession planning solutions for the AEC firms that we work with. There's my contact information. For a summary of our white paper, Champion Client Experience, please email me. Thank you. If you have any questions, post them in the mural, or I look forward to answering them directly during our live Q&A this coming Friday.
Wow, Reid, that is some amazing research you've done. I know that has been a challenge or a concern. A lot of people have been trying to figure out, how do we identify who the best people are to lead a CX transformation in our organization, one that's likely to be successful? I know just about every one of the 15 CX leaders that you studied in this research, and I can say this data certainly confirms why they are being so successful and winning awards for the CX delivery they're doing in their firms.